We are going to present the results of a three-dimensional numerical model of this rectangular area of the Irish Sea, which fits the format of the screen better turned on its side. The model generates vectors of the horizontal components of currents at positions on a 4x8 grid of pitch 15 nautical miles. This presentation shows the dynamic response of the Irish Sea to a uniformly distributed southerly wind stress field of 10 dynes per square centimetre, which corresponds approximately to a wind of 40 miles per hour, applied suddenly to the sea surface, and then kept constant. The digital clock, bottom left, shows hours and minutes since onset of the wind. The model generated data in time steps of 2 minutes over a period of 48 hours, but we are only showing the first few hours, as a steady-state condition is reached very quickly, after which no change is discernible. Let's see that again. The longest vectors represent a current velocity of approximately 90 centimeters per second. Another graphic technique is to replace the static arrows by cells of moving symbols. The motion of the symbols within each cell simulates the current vector at the center of the cell. There is no continuity of motion across the cell boundaries, which would be difficult to compute. However, we can get a smoother flow by interpolating to a finer grid of 7x16 cells. So far, we have only seen a simulation of the current at the surface of the sea. The model is three-dimensional and generates values for current at 3 different levels. This is the current on the seabed. Here the model assumes a slip condition. And this is the mid-depth current, halfway between the surface and the seabed. And let's have another look at the surface. It's desirable to be able to see the 3 levels simultaneously, but even using a different symbol for each layer, the result is confusing. We would do better to return to the coarser grid with larger and fewer symbols. One can also use different colors to separate the levels, but they get mixed up with the sea depth contours. So here's an alternative way of representing the depth of the seabed. The thickness of the grid lines are proportional to depth, the thickest lines representing 100 meters and over. The values were taken directly from the depth data supplied to the computer model. It should now be easier to distinguish the colors. The anaglyph, or stereo technique, is yet another possible way of separating the levels. Look through the red and green spectacles. Let's see that again. The calculation of three-dimensional current structure marks an advance on earlier numerical sea models, which generally have solved the vertically integrated equations of motion and continuity to yield depth mean flows without reference to the vertical distribution of current. The water is homogeneous. The model also generates another kind of data, the elevation of the sea surface due to the cumulative effect of the currents. The largest blobs represent a rise in the surface of about 15 centimeters. The smallest blobs represent a fall in the surface of about 26 centimeters. Here's the initial condition again. Perfectly level surface, zero elevation. The surface elevation takes longer to settle down to a steady state than the currents. Viewed at the same time scale, it's hard to see it changing. So here it is speeded up 8 times. Look at it again, and notice the transient oscillations which eventually get damped down by friction. We will now see a synthesis of all the data generated by the model. The 3 levels of currents, plus the surface elevation. And we will also try with the current levels in anaglyph. The coefficient of vertical eddy viscosity, which determines the system of internal stresses, is constant through the depth at any position. Along the open sea boundaries of the model, elevation and current are related by a radiation condition.